Ahoy hoy gang! If this is your first time, welcome! And if you're coming from another video, hey, we love to see it and hope you're doing okay. Season 11 is the first fully TBS Era season. We're going to see a ton of really cool ideas, some weird ideas, and overall just a very robust season. We'll get our next two-parter as well as the return of a very important political player. So, without further ado, what went right, what went wrong? Something that rhymes with Seven, or Kevin, or Devin. Hey, let's just review Season 11. As far as season premieres go, Roots might very well be the most impactful one since Pilot or 100 AD. Roots opens with one of the best cold opens ever by showing off arena football! Football with shorter barriers, a black knight, and water cannons. And what great city gets to join in the legacy? Why, none other than Langley with their now infamous Bazooka Sharks! Stan begins to fight for a stadium to be built for the Bazooka Shark team until he finds out that it would require them to demolish a tree that practically raised him in place of Jack. However, he has to go up against Roger as the King of Asphalt as well as one of the two brothers. The B story has Steve bothered that he hasn't been able to grow, so he goes to meet a doctor that Klaus recommends. Dr. Calgary, played by the man of 1,000 voices, Alan Tudyk. Dr. Calgary is a mad scientist and a solid recurring character that absolutely steals the show with his self-made assistant Billy, played by the ever-talented Kevin Michael Richardson. Stan then begins to protest the stadium being built and neglects his family to protect his tree dad. However, as the fight drags on and Steve begins to go under for his very concerning and mildly illegal leg lengthening procedure, Stan knows he has to make the right call and goes to save his son. Roots is a very much an episode about growth. It's about growing past, one's limitations, and introducing a city that is growing and thriving. Like we get the Bazooka Sharks, Dr. Calgary, and Billy all introduced in the same episode, as well as some super strong Roger personas, and just a really solid Stan and Steve story that actually comes together in the end. Roots is a 10 out of 10 episode that kicks off the season right. It might be one of, if not the best season premieres the series has ever had, and the fact that it's 11 seasons in really warms my heart. Like, to keep a show going into its 11th season on a different network and still be able to capture the charm, the heart, and the absurdity of an ever-growing Langley perfectly still after all these years is just, it's next level. I don't know. Roots just works. It's easily one of the best written episodes of a season, rife with quality. Steve is determined to touch boob, and in order to touch boob, he decides to try varsity sports and joins water polo. The B story? Stan and Roger go to a CIA auction and go in on a boat to become boat people. Fun fact, Steve's water polo coach is named James Hetfield and is played by James Hetfield. That's right, the James Hetfield of Metallica. Stop calling attention to it. It's a fun gimmick. John Cho also shows up as Vince Chung, and Barry Bostwick makes an appearance. Anyway, Klaus helps Steve thrive on the team, and he begins to take him for granted when he finally starts to get popular, and yeah, you've seen this episode before. It's not bad, and honestly it works because the two stories complement each other while also standing well on their own. Francine gets to hang out with the cool moms after Steve excels. Stan and Roger are miserable as boat people because of course they are. They're boat people. It's just unlike Seizure Suit Stanny, where it felt like a carbon copy of a great episode and just failed to hit that same tone. This episode felt like a much-deserved do-over. Sure, there's the same notes of Snot feeling neglected and Klaus being betrayed, but I think the comedy just makes it all blend together much better than, say, License to Till. The Life Aquatic with Steve Smith is a solid 8 out of 10. Haley brings the family down by telling them about all the horrible things that happened at the Cheesecake Warehouse, and she tries to figure out when she lost her joy since everyone remembers a happy Haley, and so she turns to Dr. Penguin for help. The B story is A tier. S tier even. Quintuple S tier if you would dare. Steve and the boys are discussing pork and are approached by a slow cooker salesman played by Norman Reedus of Walking Dead and Boondock Saints fame. And as he walks away telling them the slower the cook, the better the taste, the boys are enchanted by the prospect of pork that'll fall apart in your mouth. Haley gets hypnotized into being 6 again and she starts to act like a kid, even pushing Jeff away and thinking he's gross. This, of course, makes Jeff go to extreme seal bludgeoning lengths to get his wife back, all while Steve and the boys simmer a roast for 12 days and then proceed to eat the tainted meat before Steve is escorted off in a ambulance. I love that they didn't just brush everything out of the way, and it really showed that Jeff loves Haley no matter what and wants her to be happy. The B story with Steve and the gang is terrific, and it really goes on for just the right amount of time. It really, again, you have the outrageous A story and the simple B story with an outrageous twist. That being said, the A story is very simple and almost feels like a season 3 or 4 episode, much akin to Haley's. Haley Smith SEAL Team 6 is a 7 out of 10. It's the return of Seth Green to American Dad! The cold open with the Roomba is hysterical. The absolute fear in the family is incredible. I love it. If nothing else, watch the beginning of the episode. It is just when the Roomba comes in and scans the room and like, alright, I like this. I like this a lot. But that cold open also shows that Stan is completely incompetent with tech and needs Steve's help to install Facebook on his work computer. He gives Steve a tour of the complex and Stan says he might not be CIA material and starts mocking Steve to his CIA friends, which understandably upsets him, and he runs off to help the NSA, led by the aforementioned Seth Green. The episode does have some huge celebrity cameos, but they literally spell them out, so I'm not going to waste my time with it. The B story has Haley accidentally eating meat again when Klaus puts veal in his almond pancakes and starts going on a meat frenzy, determined to eat every meat she wants for a full 24-hour period before quitting meat again. And so she and Roger go on a full-on depraved meat hunt, ultimately trying to eat a gorilla's brain. And much like the Life Aquatic, it feels like another do-over. It's another exploration of Stan looking down on Steve for being geeky, but ultimately respecting his tech skills. Honestly, comparing this to, say, All About Steve from Season 1, it's a solid way to see how the show has grown. We also get Trish the Waitress, which is a recurring gag. NSA No Snoops Allowed is a quality episode that really rings true as just good quality American Dad. It doesn't push the formula, it doesn't try something different or wild, it sticks to the tried and true structure and just packs it full of quality jokes. NSA is a solid 8 out of 10. Stan has the day off and ends up stressed when Steve gets a drifter friend and Jeff and Haley need a pregnancy test, so he ends up going to the pharmacy and being confronted by a delightful medicine hag about his blood pressure, all while Roger tries to sell him on the house being a World Cup candidate. Steve's drifter is actually voiced by Eric Andre. Anyway, yeah, Stan is super stressed and needs to chill out. Bullock watched Point Break on TBS and wonders if a cyber attack on the CIA was actually done by renegade surfers instead of the person they know did it, so Stan goes undercover at the beach and learns how to cut loose thanks to Kai. Sam in the episode is actually voiced by skate and television legend Jason Lee. Anyway, Stan begins to try and take it easy, but when Bullock calls him back, he then tries to frame the surfers to keep the fun going while they chase the reverse wave. It's been a minute since we've had one of these, but it's a vignette episode where everything focuses around Stan's desire to cut loose. We see cutaways to Steve and his drifter, Roger getting the candidacy for the World Cup, but everything comes back to Stan and the waves. It's a really fun episode that teaches the importance of learning to relax and know how to care in moderation. Stan Smith as Keanu Reeves is just a terrific 8 out of 10 that feels right. There's some episodes of the TBS era that I just call groove episodes. Episodes that just feel like solid American Dad. There are some that work with the formula, some that diverge from the formula, and then there's some that just know that they're American Dad. The spirit of American Dad is in the cells as they just tell a genuinely entertaining story involving the whole family. As these episodes continue to evolve, remember these episodes are meant to be watched on streaming or cable, where you're gonna usually see them in a marathon format. They're gonna go to wilder places, and this is a perfect example of an episode that wouldn't necessarily work on Fox. Not because of any particular theme, just the overall absurdity might have been too much for a broadcast network. It's Francine's birthday, and so Stan decided to get her a gift, but not before in his dreams she gifts him with 81 bald eagles. He got her season tickets to baseball. She hates baseball. MC Scat Cat makes an appearance. Anyway, Stan is afraid they're growing apart and tries to show he and Francine have common ground, and ends up fighting to get them onto the kiss cam, and through all of it, Francine actually starts to get interested in baseball. Patton Oswalt and Craig Robinson would make appearances in the A story. The B story? Steve tries to keep Roger honest and defend the people that have come to him for help battling oil giants, when sure enough, they end up fighting against Roger. Sam Elliott would cameo in this story. Okay, neither story of the episode is bad at all, but the B story with Roger as a member of the Nevada legislature and Steve fighting to keep him honest works amazingly. It might be one of my favorite Steve and Roger stories. It's much in that same vein as Roger and Francine, where he goes, I haven't been entirely honest with you. Here, Roger is pretending to be this character, very much in a vein of like Aaron Brockovich, and then he's also on the other side of it. Something that he does frequently, but Steve is just aware of it every step of the way. And it's, again, very nice to see a good Stan and Francine episode. All the jokes on the A story work incredibly well, and it's just very good to see when they care about one another. But Steve and Roger have a predictably brilliant adventure. Kiss Kiss Cam Cam is a fantastic 9 out of 10 that needs to be watched over and over again. Stan is kidnapped and declared in charge of the CIA calendar and becomes a hypercritical mad lad mad with power. After burning through assistant after assistant, Haley offers to be his assistant as part of a revenge scheme for him tearing her art up in front of her when she was a kid. She begins to go above and beyond, and when she finally is able to destroy the copybook, he finally compliments her and she becomes dead set on fixing the problem. It's a very sweet Stan and Haley episode that also gives us just peak CIA. Great Bullock and Dick delivery by Patrick Stewart and David Koechner respectively, and even Tyrese Gibson making an appearance. Just a super sound A story that sings through every beat. The B story has Roger going to college for criminology and instead signing up for a discovery card and going on a wild adventure to try and find a place to use the card to get discovery points. However, when he fails to shop at Toomey, that's right, Toomey! He finds a secret underground mall where he can spend the points until he has to run from the collectors. The Devil Wears a Lapel Pin is a 10 out of 10 episode that carries a ton of weight. The B story with Roger is so brilliant because it's, again, just super absurdist. And the A story works well because it's actually some of the best lines Jeff and Haley have together, as they're both very ingrained into it. It's not just a Stan and Haley episode, Jeff is also there as a mediating voice. I love this episode, and it might be the best episode of the entire season. Like, these are longer seasons than usual. We haven't had seasons this long since we combined seasons 1 and 2, and yet they don't give up quality for quantity, and consistently to this point, we've only been given greatness. Steve is on his way to sell chocolates to help inner city kids while Francine has an existential crisis about her lack of funds. Roger then proceeds to eat all of Steve's chocolate he was supposed to sell. Steve accuses Roger of being selfish, which, I mean, yeah, he totally is. Water is wet, and Roger is a selfish alien. These are facts. Anyway, Principal Lewis hears that he doesn't have the money or the chocolate, and so he decides to send Steve to the at-risk class. Again, just wow. Kevin Michael Richardson really brings Principal Lewis to life. I don't know, he wouldn't be half as funny without him. And I mean, just him playing Billy and all these assortments of side characters really adds to American Dad, to Family Guy, to any show he is in. I know the man recently won an Emmy for F is for Family, where he played Rosie, but it cannot be understated how much he has had an impact on such a long-running show. The B story has Stan taking Francine to a retirement home, and he is so comfortable he decides he doesn't want to leave. The B story is predictable and fine, but the A story, having Roger as the new teacher for the at-risk kids as Mr. Stan Dan Deliver, really, really, works. It's almost at a point where they bury the B story with quality. Between Scott Grimes' next level delivery and one of the best Roger personas, you just have a great story that, while it is absolutely a parody of movies like Stand and Deliver, Freedom Writers, etc., it also just stands on its own right. Like, if you haven't watched any Stephen King movies, you probably wouldn't get a lot of the references in Family Guy's Three Kings, and for better or worse, that makes the episode fall apart. If you don't get American Dad references, you're still going to get really solid jokes. Again, American Dad doesn't rely on parody, it incorporates it, which is a very important tightrope to walk. Take Venture Brothers, for instance, or Rick and Morty. They're very obviously parodies of original properties, but they stand on their own right as their own projects. Like Stand and Deliver is a movie from 1988 starring Edward James Olmos and Lou Diamond Phillips. Do you know either of those actors without having to Google them? This episode came out in 2016, almost 30 years after the movie released. It references the Janet Jackson Rhythm Tour from 1990, 26 years after the fact. These are not topical references. They're references they knew would work for the episode. Not to say the show is the first to parody Stand and Deliver, though. South Park famously did it with Ika Penis and Eric Cartmenez, which, fun fact, came out 20 years after the movie. I mean, American Dad is one of the few series that can do a Leon the Professional reference or the Seventh Seal and get away with it. They've earned their references, and that's something that should really be celebrated. I love Stand and Deliver. I think it might be one of the strongest Steven Roger episodes out there. That being said, the B story is admittedly pretty weak and really shows how far they've dumbed down Stan. I'm not saying it doesn't work and dumb Stan can be a lovable character, it's just, I don't know, it feels like it makes the segments drag in parts. That being said, Stand and Deliver is a solid 9 out of 10. When Terry canonically goes on tour with 311 and leaves Greg, Francine decides to help him. Greg comes to dinner and he reveals he misses Terry because of their banter, and when Greg and Francine hit it off, he invites her to be his co-host on the news. And so she goes to help, and it's not long before she's taking over. But when the station gets a new weatherman, Memphis Stormfront, played by arguably one of the funniest men alive, Andrew Daly, Greg begins to find a new partner and move on from Francine. The B story has Steve, Haley, and Roger playing Dream Phone, a board game about fictional dates. Roger gets a cute boy and gets obsessed, going so far as driving cross-country to find the actor that posed for the character and meeting him in classic Roger fashion. Anchor Fran is another example of how the American Dad world in TBS keeps expanding. Memphis Stormfront will be a recurring semi-frequent character and really does deliver some great lines and feels like he fits right in. It even gives Daly a chance to deliver some downright chilling delivery and echoes later on, much akin to his role in Solar Opposite's better half, The Wall. Talk about a B story dominating a show. You really kinda love to see it. I don't know, Francine mad with power and Roger obsessed with the board game feels super on brand and in character to the point that it's just more solid American Dad. Another great groove episode. Not to mention Stan's quips are just hysterical this episode. Anchor Fran is a scorching 9 out of 10. The 200 is in fact the 200th episode. That's right, fellow dadders. If you've gotten to this point, you have officially watched 200 American Dad episode reviews. What a milestone. I am going to take a minute here and just say, I hit 1,000 subs because of you guys, and I can't thank any of you enough. This has been an awe-inspiring change for my life, and it truly warms my heart that you all enjoy these. That being said, like all things considered, it's amazing for any show to hit its 200th episode landmark, much less to do it through a cancellation and still feeling super fresh this deep into the show. Admittedly, there's not a ton to talk about with the episode. That's not to say it's bad at all. If anything, it's really, really chillingly good. But it's an episode you should watch and appreciate. It's like American Dad meets Fallout with warning signs of the 200 all over. There are scenes that could have easily been played as jokes, that you could make a laugh track pun about things falling into disrepair, and then just do a jaunty jig on down to the next plot point. But the 200 doesn't do that. 100 AD celebrated with big fanfare about killing off 100 characters. The 200 mentions a blast and everything is wasteland. Principal Lewis is a cannibal and there truly feels like there's no peace. Remember, you're supposed to watch these episodes one after another at this point, and to go from Anchor Fran to this is jarring, but in a great way. A chill runs down your spine, and there's just this unsettling bit to it, where even as it skips to the intro, and then the intro goes into an emergency broadcast, you know that something isn't right. You see Stan's remorse for not being with his family when the blast happened. If it was Peter in this position, he'd probably accentuate the messages with a sad fart noise or something. Sure, the cutaway bits are comedic, but how he treats them now shows how he genuinely loves his family. The 200 needs to be seen and appreciated. It needs to be taken in. Turn the lights off, light candles, bundle up with a good blanket and don't look at your phone. Tune everything out except for this episode and just watch. See how the characters are written. Watch as the world is rebuilt in 20 short minutes. Put Shenandoah on your Spotify playlist. The 200 is less a celebration of the show and more a celebration of the characters, even to a literal sense near the end. If anything, it's a celebration of the fans. It's a celebration of what the fans have come to know and why the fans have loved the show for so long. As far as milestone episodes go, it's definitely one of the most drastic diversions from form, and it cuts to the core because of it. The 200 is a genuinely awe-inspiring 10 out of 10. And then there's the frickin' Unincludeds. Steve and Snot get egged at a party, and when they run into their future selves that are ultra successful because of how much they were bullied, Steve and Snot are told to just endure instead of going down to the party that they had set up, but they try and change fate, altering their futures in the process. Meanwhile, Haley and Roger go to a restaurant. When Roger gave his order, the waitress just shrugs it off while complimenting Haley's, and he decides to vow revenge, as Roger does. And so they frequently start going to figure out the order, and when they fail, he becomes a waiter and tries to sabotage her. That's a whole episode. Credit where credit is due, Naya Rivera does a great job as Lolo Fuentes, but yeah, overall the episode is it's just kind of there. If you like Snot and Steve episodes, sure, fine, it's up there. To his credit, I do really hate on Snot. I gotta say, Curtis Armstrong does do a good job playing Snot. I just really cannot stand the character a lot of the time, even if he will eventually get much better episodes down the line. It just felt like padding. It was okay. It didn't really do anything. There were admittedly some fine jokes about the party, but it feels like an episode you've seen before, even though you've never seen it. It felt like filler. It felt like pack filler. That's it. The Unincludeds is like I don't know, I guess a 6 out of 10. Oh hey, a real episode. Francine and Roger are having coffee as one of Roger's A-list personas when they meet Meredith Fields, the most interesting woman in Langley Falls, who just so happens to be a dentist's wife. Roger is absolutely in awe of her, and as he tries to compete with her, he finds himself taking over her identity to the point he takes over her life. Meredith Fields is actually played by Patricia Clarkson. The B story has Stan, Steve, Haley, and Jeff coming home from CrossFit and relaxing while mocking Klaus. This is the first appearance of Roger's magical persona factory, as well as the first showing of one of his most powerful personas yet, Raider Dave! It's a sweet throwback, as well as again the expansion of the American Dad world by giving Roger near unlimited resources to be whoever the show needs him to be. It just works immaculately, and it really fills up a lot of plot holes that might have been there along the way. It's nice to see that they're filling in parts that may not have needed to be addressed. Anyway, as the rest of the family is stuck and in agony as their body sees up, Klaus decides to throw a birthday party, inviting friends from Craigslist, all while I Like to Move It plays on a loop. It should be very important to note that Klaus, while a punching bag, does kind of deserve it with how his character has devolved. It's a very smart thing playing Klaus this way, and D. Bradley Baker really does know how to perfectly deliver every line. We'll go much deeper into Klaus as the story goes on, but the B story is brilliant with just how unhinged he can be when he wants to be. No one told him he couldn't throw a birthday party. No one was really that mean to him, but he just took it and escalated to an absolute next level. The dentist's wife never outstays its welcome and carries both the A and B story story with an equal amount of reverence. Having Roger compete for the limelight against someone that could not care less is perfect. It almost plays off of the same thing from the previous B story with him competing against the waitress, except here he has someone that is actually much higher than him, almost looking down and pitying him. Everything is on brand, solid deliveries overall. It's just by and far a huge step up from the Unincludeds. The Dentist's Wife is a solid 10 out of 10. Francine pretends she's a widow with Roger while Stan is away on an assignment to see what it would be like because he's constantly going on dangerous missions and she never knows when she's going to get the call that he's not coming home. She begins to enjoy all the extra attention and starts to run with it until Stan has to find her and show her that everything is gonna be okay. The A story is only slightly forgettable because the B story is so terrific. Steve and the boys decide to do basement wrestling and go full pageantry with it. Flamboyant costumes, smack talk, just good old-fashioned WWF kid fun. Oh, and then Principal Lewis drops in and proceeds to knock their blocks off brutally to take the fake belt. Every time they're just minding their own business, he's busting in to beat them down. The episode is fantastic, and while the Francine and Roger parts do drag on, the conclusion of the A story is very touching. However, through it all, the B story with Steve and his friends just keeps hammering home. Like, I don't hate Snot as a character, I hate what he does. He can be done well, as can all the boys, and I think this is a great example of it. They also just have progressively, like Klaus, made Principal Lewis such an unhinged entity that it's totally believable he'd do this. We saw it with his end of days, and I can't go back to work, but it's just gone worse and worse. Even in Stand and Deliver, he has taken on a whole new persona. I don't know, Widow's Peak is a solid 8 out of 10. Steve has cultivated a sci-fi wonder community with other kids through the world of imagination, where they live pretty basic lives, all things considered. Space tailor, space moisture farmer, and the like. However, when Francine comes to pick him up, she falls in love with this new LARPing world and decides to rule over it as their queen, while Steve was just an elected official. It really speaks to how Francine feels powerless in her own home and just wants a place where she matters, eventually shoving a rift between her and Steve to make a place for herself. The B story has Stan bringing home a shark, and so he, Roger, and Haley build an aquatic theme park around it and their other attractions. The imagination angles are really creative, and the coach played by Rob Riggle is a really nice touch. It makes sense that the boys would build a sci-fi world that celebrates the moisture farmers of Tatooine, rather than, say, the Jedi of the Council. They know their speed, and they're not going to break the speed limit anytime soon. The B story is just so absurd it sings. From the Miami Dolphins being trained to the killer whale, everything just works in the insanity of it all. This episode is another prime example of just peak Formula American Dad, another solid groove. We've seen challenges to the norm, and even in the next 2 episodes we'll see a significant undertaking, but by and far this is one of the strongest examples of great jokes, heartfelt moments, solid story, and just everything you would want from the concept of American Dad. The Nova Centuris Borough Board of Tourism presents American Dad is a very respectable and out of this world 10 out of 10. It's our next 2-parter. When Steve gets kicked out of Sunday school on Easter for beating up the other kids in the Easter egg hunt, he goes to the adult services and begins tearing apart the sermon. Stan tries to correct him and change his ways, but as they investigate more and more, he starts to realize none of it is making any sense to him either. He has a crisis of the faith and starts to develop a messiah complex, convinced he needs an ark before a massive flood washes the world away. They head to South Korea where they run into the Daesung Heavy Industries and a massive gas ship filled with animals. The company has a fake messiah experience, and as the winds begin to kick up, Stan kicks all the staff off the boat, arguing to convince the family to stay with him and keep going on. The episode ends with the family sailing off into the watery unknown as they believe a cataclysmic flood has wiped the world away. This is a very interesting two-parter. It's not like Stan of Arabia, where it carries one message throughout, and it's not like 100 AD in Son of Stan, where Son of Stan effectively just sort of wrapped up the idea. It's a weird sort of splinter point that we'll see in the next episode. I'm going to hold off on giving a rating since there's two parts, but the episode on its own does do a good job of carrying narrative weight. You feel Stan have that crisis of faith, and it's not just broadcast to you through a few quick scenes. Stan likes the order that faith provides, and having that stripped away understandably makes him feel very vulnerable. It's a very interesting episode that does explore Stan's psychosis and why he's doing it. If it was a Peter or something, he'd have a Moses beard and a heartbeat and would actually hear the literal voice of God. Stan perceives it through nature, like someone having a mental breakdown. Maybe it's God, maybe it's all in his head. There's just really no way to tell, and that carries an extra weight to it. And then it leads directly into Stan having the same crisis as he begs for any advice from God and seems to be dealing with a twinge of survivor's guilt as they ride out the stormy seas. Roger tries to cheer everyone up with a musical number, and then the ship explodes, sending everyone on their own journeys. Stan and Francine lose their memory and wander an island naked as they struggle to survive and learn how to communicate without talking. Steve, Roger, and a wolf that Roger saved have to share a raft as they drift in the ocean, and Haley and Jeff get saved by the US Navy and Jeff decides to enlist. Each of these stories is fine, but it feels almost rushed to get everything back to normal. It just kind of throws everything away. There's one apology at the end of the episode, and it basically says, hey, don't worry about it, just Ungok. Ungok indeed, American Dad. Overall, it's a weird two-parter that doesn't address the ideas, just the story, and then goes somewhere completely different with it. It's okay. The separate vignettes are all good, and it's nice to see Stan and Francine re-falling in love, Jeff take on more responsibility, and Roger suffer from the salt madness, but it's to the service of just going back to the way things were. You know it has to. You know it has to return back to that base, but you could have gone somewhere even more outlandish with it. You could have gone farther, and yet it feels like they were almost timid with it, and they had to pull back. There was no flood. There was no prophet. It just is. In a cosmic sort of way, if you're rationalizing it across the stars, yeah, sure. You could argue that swift return to normalcy is just how it is, and it just works because of that. But in this example, this two-parter is maybe like a 7 out of 10 overall. Roger is a street hoops fiend, but when he breaks his ankle, his spirit breaks with it. And so Francine demands that Stan let him play in his junior league with his buddies, and he learns how to play basketball like old men do until they enter a doubles tournament and end up facing off against Yao Ming and Shaq. Shaq being played by the incredibly talented Aries Spears. Fun fact, Jordan Peele and Keegan-Michael Key are also in the episode, as well as Deborah Wilson. It's a veritable Mad TV reunion! Remember Mad TV? Now you do. All in all, it's a solid A story that makes Roger appreciate Stan, and sure, it's a message we've seen before, but how it was handled was admittedly really cheeky and a lot of fun. The basketball angle just kinda works for the characters, and overall is a delight. It's great to see the Shaq angle and the Yao Ming being brought up. Again, the jokes are really solid. The A story is great. Do not misinterpret that. But the B story? Yeah, I guess I should mention it. It's only one of the greatest things American Dad has ever done! Steve Smith gives us his own rendition of Trapped in the Closet. Just in case I'm too old and just assume people know what this is and actually have no idea what Trapped in the Closet is, back in 2005, R. Kelly would begin a musical soap opera where he effectively narrated a giant insane narrative that would go for 33 chapters until it concluded in 2012. Here we have Steve just belting out some of the most outlandish things you've ever seen, and it's incredible. Seriously, like, the A story is, it's very good. It's not bad at all. But then the B story starts, and it's like your face is blown to the back of the auditorium, and you can't stop laughing as it just gets weirder and more absurd. Like, I don't even want to go into detail on it, because it just needs to be experienced on its own. But again, it goes right back to that idea that it's not a direct parody. It's in the spirit of parody. It's closer to, say, Trapped in the Drive-Thru, the Weird Al song, than making direct references to Trapped in the Closet. It has the same tempo, those same beats, but it's not mocking R. Kelly or the song, it's just repurposing it, and it shines because of it. Criss-Cross Applesauce is a 10 out of 10 and essential viewing for any American Dad fan, as it is just next level. When Stan has to clean the deck up and borrows Roger's supercharged power washer, he ends up uncovering a salt deposit that attracts the Gordon Salt Company to buy the rights to the minerals. Alan Ruck of Ferris Bueller and Succession fame plays the head executive. Anyway, it's revealed that Steve actually owns the rights to the minerals in the backyard in exchange for baseball cards Stan wanted that Steve had no interest in. And so the family and the Gordon Salt Group try to coerce him into selling the rights and opening a giant shaft. And honestly, where Seizure Suit Stanny in the last season felt like it was just a rehash of Rubberneckers, this feels like Star Trek from season 1 just done better. You have Steve not wanting to sell the rights, not because he's greedy, but because that backyard is where he has some of his fondest memories. He loves his family and he doesn't want to give those memories up for anything, and yeah, it's really only something American Dad can do and have it have an impact. Let's say hypothetically Chris from Family Guy found the salt deposit, or Bart, and was offered a ton of money for it. They'd sell it in a heartbeat, and that would be the plot of the rest of the episode, is what they're doing with that money. Steve has always been shown to care about his family. Maybe less so during, say, Minstrel Krampus, but he's always trying to impress his dad, has a weird relationship with his mom, has a sibling relationship of love and hate with Haley, and honestly, it makes sense he'd be so conflicted. It's never painted as a weakness of his character, but rather a defining quality, and I think that's what makes American Dad really stand out above the rest. I've said it once, I'll say it again, American Dad has heart, and the talent of the writers, support the WGA, really helps bring the heart to the forefront and remind you why this family is a family and why it works. Mind Struggle is a 10 out of 10 that keeps the episode to one story and focuses on it, giving it plenty of time to grow naturally and shine. Stan feels like Haley is getting bored of their museum trips because she's an adult and is absolutely bored of them. So to revitalize her love of history, he reanimates the once very dead President Andrew Garfield, played by the instantly recognizable and brilliant Chris Parnell. Paul Reubens would also make a cameo appearance. Anyway, President Garfield runs off with Haley to see all the wonders of the modern age, while Stan revives his assassin to track and hunt him down. The B-story has Steve writing for the school newspaper, desperate to get the cheerleader column, but when forced to write about anything else, it comes out as super popular and highly erotic. Principal Lewis reads the articles with a silky smooth narration that makes the whole school lose it over his new writing talents. And then he gets the Cheer Squad coverage, and yeah, it all falls apart. It's a very obvious bait and switch, and it's a Steve story you could see a mile away from the setup, but it really is a solid B story to such an outlandish A story. You need something where you know what's going to happen when you have a former president running around and bragging about orange soda. Oh, and at the end of the episode, it's not like he gets put into amber or anything. President Garfield would be a recurring character going forward, which would actually make Chris Parnell a recurring character in not only Family Guy, but American Dad, Rick and Morty, and Archer all concurrently. Which, I mean, give the man credit where credit's due. That's impressive. Garfield and Friends welcomes the absurdity and shines above just being another Stan and Haley feel awkward with each other episode. It's a 9 out of 10 that continues the growth of the TBS era. We open in Roger's place, where Stan talks about how if they make a mistake, they have to cover it up. And then we get a flashback to a Christmas party where someone forgot a gift for the gift exchange, and Stan is put on the case to figure out who did it. And yeah, no, it was Stan. It's just Stan. Yeah, of course it's Stan. That's the whole point of the episode. He then goes with Roger to try and cover the whole thing up. The B story has Steve being a good boy date for girls so that they can go out with their bad boy boyfriends after he gets them out of the house and starts a side hustle. Eventually, he ends up spreading class 5 measles to the girls through a handkerchief he shared with all of them. All while Stan lies and tries to hide his lies as he slowly breaks down from trying to support the family he'd promised he'd cover the pension of after framing the dead husband. This is the season's Christmas episode, and it really just kind of feels like an afterthought. Sure, it is focused around Secret Santa and everything, but it just feels empty compared to every other episode of the season. I hate to say it, but this might be the weakest episode of the bunch. It's not bad, it's just hollow. It just doesn't really feel like it does anything. Like, the message at the end of being honest and not lying is great, but also like it's a weird way we got there. I don't know. Gift Me Liberty is like a 5 out of 10, and probably the weakest Christmas episode we're gonna see. Stan is afraid if he doesn't befriend Steve, he might end up taking him out. So the two begin to bond over bowling when they can't find anything else to bond with. And when Steve's talent is recognized and he's about to be taken on tour by his manager, played by Lance Henriksen, Stan tries to disguise himself and stabs Steve in the ankle to stop him. Steve then tries to find the person who assaulted him, while Stan tries to cover his tracks and aid his son. On the one hand, it's great to see how versatile and smart Steve is. Not only is he able to read crime scenes, he's also good at bowling, but on the other, it's just heartbreaking to see Stan get so desperate not to lose his son, he'd hurt him, and it wouldn't be the last time it's gonna happen. It's still an attempt at a heartfelt story that still works by hitting all the right comedic timings, but overall it just kind of takes away from its element. It would almost feel better if Stan wasn't involved in it at all and just walked away trying to respect Steve's feelings, but it just doesn't really land. There's some fun parts. There's a lot of really fun comedy to it. The story at the core, though, just doesn't really work. The B story is a super solid Klaus, Roger, and Haley adventure, where Haley and Roger compete to see who has a longer attention span by watching an 86-hour Ken Burns documentary about bicycles. Next of Pin shines because of the jokes, not the stories. The stories are just kind of there, but they have all these individual jokes snuck in that elevate both of them. Next of Pin is a decent enough 8 out of 10 that maintains a solid steady beat throughout. Congratulations, gang! We only have one more episode left to this outstanding season. Bullock continues to slip off his rocker and has picked up late-night DJing and has been sending agents on riskier and riskier missions because of it, eventually almost sending Stan on a mission he would have never returned from. So Stan has to become a DJ to beat Bullock and get him to stop the chaotic running around. The B story has Jeff getting into psychedelic teas and regaling Roger and Steve about a mystic cosmic instrument that when played reimagines reality. And so Roger is determined to help him build his weird little instrument. There's really not a ton to say about the season finale. I really like that it's an Avery v Stan A story, and the B story feels almost refreshing having Jeff inserted into a Roger and Steve adventure. Is it better than Seizure Suit Stanny? Oh, hands down, no question. Does it feel like a season finale? No, not really. And as we go deeper into the TBS era, we're gonna get a weird grab bag of finales. Sometimes they'll be really good, sometimes they'll be really out there, sometimes they'll be surreal and make you question what American Dad is. Standard Deviation is fine. Stan and his trusty flash drive is funny, the instrument quest is endearing, but overall it's just okay. It's still a, somewhat solid 7 or 8 out of 10 that is still a very high note for the season as a whole to end on. Phew, I am getting my auditory steps in this season. This is, I record all of these in one go, and I gotta say, I'm working that diaphragm. So that's season 11. Anything you think I got wrong? Got right? What was your favorite episode? Least favorite? Let me know in the comments below. And like always, if you liked what you saw, make sure to like, subscribe, and tell your friends we're out here sharing all this American Dad goodness. Overall, season 11 is a really fantastic outing that hopefully put a lot of people's hearts at ease, seeing that American Dad wouldn't be jumping the bazooka shark at TBS anytime soon. The writing is still just as crisp as ever, the delivery is still next level, and yeah, no, season 11 is a solid 22 episode block of quality good stuff. That being said, at the time of writing this, production has halted on American Dad and Family Guy in solidarity with the WGA strike for fair wage pay. While animation writers are not represented by the WGA, it is important to remember that a rising tide lifts all ships, and we wouldn't have the quality programming we have without the hard work and creativity of the writers that make it happen. AI couldn't write something like Mind Struggle or The 200. I'm not going to grandstand or anything, I'm just a very tiny YouTube channel, but it is important to recognize the strike has on an industry and a show like American Dad, and how it impacts other beloved shows and the great people that work on them. At the end of the day, all I'm saying is remember production on shows like American Dad are a team effort, and everyone should be paid a fair wage for their work. Controversial, I know. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching, and I just genuinely cannot thank you all enough for the amazing reception these videos have gotten. Thanks to each and every one of you, I've been able to apply for partners, see my sub count soar, and get to interact with all of you amazing people. I have learned things about this show that I have loved since I was a kid just by your wonderful comments and suggestions. I'm going to try to keep the season reviews coming out at a consistent pace, but just a forewarning, the TBS Era is 22 episodes long every single season, so it's going to take me a little longer than usual in the script back end. Don't want you to think I'm getting lazy or anything, but yeah, it is a little bit more of a lengthy process. Anyway, with that being said, remember we do have a Twitch, Twitter, Patreon, and Discord for all your additional academic needs. Thank you so much for tuning in. Stay strong, keep fighting, and no matter what's going on in your life, I believe in you. I'll see you next time when we delve into Season 12. Goodbye, everybody.